productive, innovative, influential.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, smart people. Welcome to Visible Convention Hall. In this very special day, CFDS UGM collaborating with Campus Firstland and Data Research Center from University of Groningen, supported by NUFIC, are holding Digitalk 53. By focusing on the topic of revolving around cybersecurity issues, Digitalk 53 Orange Knowledge Programming offers a series of guest lectures that will be bringing up interesting topics related to cybersecurity. Selamat datang kepada smart people semuanya. Selamat datang di Visible Convention Hall. Pada hari ini kami akan menyelenggarakan Digitalk 53 bekerja sama dengan Campus Firstland dan juga Data Research Center dari University of Groningen dan juga didukung oleh NUFIC. My name is Chandra Sujama and I will be the master of ceremony for today's event. And to light up the discussion, I would like to introduce you to our honorable speakers who master the issues related to AI, artificial intelligence, and also governance. The first speaker is Professor Dr. Andrej Janko, who is Professor of Governance and Innovation from Campus Firstland. Good afternoon, Professor Andrej. Please give applause for Professor Andrej. The next speaker is Dr. Oskar Josef, the Assistant Professor at the Department of Governance and Innovation of Campus Firstland. Good afternoon, Dr. Oskar. Welcome to Visible Convention Hall. So, smart people, now we are proceeding to the next agenda, which is the presentations by our guest lecturers. But before that, I'm going to hand over the floor to our moderator, Mrs. Anissa Pramita Maharani, who is the Young Researcher of Center for Media Society. Smart people, setelah ini kami akan melanjutkan acara berikutnya, yaitu presentasi dari guest lectures yang akan dimoderasi oleh moderator kami, Ibu Anissa Pramita Maharani, a Young Researcher dari Center for Digital Society. Miss Anissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chandra. Terima kasih, smart people. Thank you to each of you for coming and being here with us today. We are delighted to be able to welcome you all to join the Orange Knowledge Program Cybersecurity Guest Lecture Series, which is actually one of the parallel sessions that we have today, part of our closing activities of the NUFIC Orange Knowledge Program, the name of our program, the name of our project. Tailor-made training plus capacity building on interdisciplinary cybersecurity training. And before we get started, I would like to express my gratitude to the Data Research Center team, Campus Firstland, University of Groningen, our partner for the last 2 years, working on this program funded by NUFIC. And I'm Anissa. I'm the project leader of Orange Knowledge Program from CFDS, and will be guiding the Digitalk discussion in today's Digitalk. And then the event will be started with a presentation from our speakers, and then continued with the discussion session. Without further ado, let's start our discussion with listening to Professor Andrej, who will be presenting his research entitled Cybernetic Governance, Regulation, and Future of Warfare. Prof. Andrej, the floor is yours.
Hello, smart people. Very nice meeting you. It is a huge pleasure to be here today. I will sit for the time being, but I will get up very, very soon. I would like to talk with you today about a concept that I am currently developing that I refer to as cybernetic governance. And the idea of cybernetic governance really came to me when discussing with a colleague and friend from ETH Zurich about the changes that we are going to witness in warfare. We are going to see developments in warfare that we have not seen in the past. We've seen a lot. We have seen the robotics increasing and autonomous weapons being produced. We have seen new weapons of war encroaching upon the ways and means we fight wars. We've seen cyber as a new domain of warfare. And even the military, the American military, but all the militaries are nowadays referring to cyber as the fifth domain of warfare. Cyber as the fifth domain of warfare, next to land, sea, air, space. So, what happens if different technologies are coming together? And that was really the question. And in no other area we can see that more than in warfare. Can we have the next slide? So you might remember Barack Obama. He was growing up in Indonesia, and at some point as a president he came forward and he said, basically, I'm here to announce we're building Iron Man. And what he meant with that really was a project that the Department of Defense and DARPA was working on, a fully featured exoskeleton, and they presented a video with bullets ricocheting off this exoskeleton, and this soldier single-handedly storming a compound with enemy combatants and overwhelming them all. But what he launched that day, what he unleashed that day, was really a new era of warfare. An era of warfare that changes not only the technologies that we're using, but how these technologies are coming together. So what I will talk today about is, for one, how does technology converge and what does it mean for regulation? What I mean with converge is when different technologies are coming together, also different regulations that govern these technologies are coming together. Then I will briefly talk about what I mean with cybernetic governance, and then we'll elaborate a little bit on the concepts that are associated. So, when we look at the regulation of warfare, we have first and foremost the laws of war in mind, international humanitarian law. But we also know from the decision of the International Court of Justice on the role of international humanitarian law, that international humanitarian law is merely a lex specialis to the lex generalis of human rights law. What does that mean? The laws of war do not replace the laws of peacetime. The laws of peacetime continue also during wartime. That means that in wartime we have international humanitarian law applicable, human rights law applicable, questions surrounding data protection and privacy applicable, questions surrounding medical ethics applicable, tort law applicable, and all other regulations that regulate our daily behavior still applicable. So that brings us to a potentially very complicated set of affairs, because as you are all aware, during warfare, a lot of damage, human suffering, and pain is caused. A lot of institutions are being destroyed. So a lot of legal effects are triggered at the very same time. And this is what I want to discuss with you today. And I will use the enhanced soldier as an example, because nowhere else do we see the complexity of that regulatory mess that we are getting into than with the enhanced soldier. So what is an enhanced soldier? Well, we are in an age where we are more and more connected with different technologies. I will ask just a very brief hands. Who of you does have a cell phone in the pocket right now? Most of you. Who does not have a cell phone in the pocket right now? Nobody. Okay. Thank you. So, you are all, by virtue of carrying your cell phone with you, connected to the internet, connected to cell phone towers. But not only are you connected, you are also constantly being monitored. You have a set of sensors in your phone. And nowadays we are exceeding 10 to 15 sensors per phone. We have microphones, heat sensors, we have light sensors through cameras, infrared sensors, we have movement sensors, we have position sensors, we have compasses, and. We have digital antennas sensing radio waves, whether it's Bluetooth, that's Wi-Fi, that's telecom signals, and so forth. So you are carrying around a computer that is directly connected to several supercomputers that are constantly getting information about you. That's step one. What is the next step? Bringing these sensors everywhere with you. And the third step will be integrating those sensors into your body, into your physical system. And this is really the domain where cybernetics is becoming relevant. So when we talk about convergence, we're talking about the convergence of different technologies with what we could refer to as the human platform. The human being as a platform for technology application. And I'll just give here a few examples. This is from a research project by the British and the German defense ministries. The project is called Human Augmentation, the Dawn of a New Paradigm. And what you see here are just a few applications. Exoskeletons, so skeletons that enhance your physical capabilities. Headphones with compass. Also, you might have heard of a trend nowadays in technology of the first cyborgs coming up. For example, there is a American that has implanted himself with a photosensor that can see infrared and ultraviolet light, and whenever this is being picked up, this light is being picked up, he gets a signal that he can hear. But it is implanted directly into his head, so he's the first human cyborg. And the interesting thing is that he has thereby expanded his field of vision into the ultraviolet and the infrared spectrum. Neuromodulation. Neuromodulation refers to both implants but also chemical compounds that help modify our mental behavior, increasing speed of reaction, increasing processing capabilities, but also allows you to issue hormones, to issue other chemical compounds that either help you calm down or activate. For example, imagine you're a soldier in the field, you need to exert a lot of energy, adrenaline would be very helpful. Imagine you have to concentrate because you are waiting for the perfect shot. You need to be very calm. Then a calming compound might be very helpful. So these are technologies that are being already experimented on. Telepresence, also a form of human augmentation. Telepresence refers to people using remote control systems in order to navigate and steer robots. And you might have seen different robots that DARPA has provided, for example, the large dog that they showcased several times. So these robots are increasingly replacing humans in the field. And as I said, the more technology gets integrated also onto the human platform, the closer the connection and the easier the control mechanisms are happening. Also, augmentation on the visual level, for example, augmented reality, another way of bringing together technologies with the human platform. So what is happening then with the human platform is that we are witnessing a convergence of different regulatory frameworks. Technologies, the more complex they are, the more they require sophisticated software to steer them, also referred to as artificial intelligence. So, for example, if you wear an exoskeleton, in order to make it behave and move very efficiently and adapt to you as a wearer, the software that is operating it is trained by an artificial intelligence system. With other words, within the European Union, we very soon will have a regulation that you will hear in about 10 minutes that is governing that framework. At the same time, there is privacy data that is being collected from yourself in order to train that system. There might be other intelligences that are affecting your decision. For example, imagine you are wearing an exoskeleton and your commanding officer is telling you, you need to take that shot. And you say, no, there might be civilians in this compound, but he can remotely trigger your finger or trigger the weapon that you're holding. Who is responsible? Is it the commanding officer or is it you? So we're coming into a more and more complex ethical framework as well, where human agency becomes very questionable. Imagine if remotely a commanding officer can inject you with adrenaline in order to make you more aggressive and more acute and aware of the situation. But under this influence of compounds in your body, you are committing a war crime. Who is responsible? Medical regulations are applied at the same time because, of course, these medical procedures that are being performed live in an operation on you, they have legal consequences and effects. Which ethical boundaries are we crossing? And last but not least, how does that even affect the very basic principles of international humanitarian law, where the individual was always judged on what we call mens rea, your mental state, and to what extent did you have an intention to commit a certain act, if you're not anymore in control over your own body. So you see the ways and means of how we are fusing with technology is fusing us also with different regulations that were not before directly applicable to individuals. And this is what I refer to as convergence of governance. Now, in the 1960s, the concept of cybernetics became very popular. And Wiener in this book on cybernetics, defined it as follows. We have decided to call the entire field of control and communication theory, whether in the machine or in the animal, by the name of cybernetics, which we form from the Greek kybernetos or steersman. The idea of cybernetics really emerged because it became increasingly difficult to control mechanical machines. The problem was that mechanical machines, in order to be controlled effectively, require some sort of feedback. Imagine you're sitting in a plane. When you're sitting in a plane and you're steering the wings, if you do not have feedback, if you do not feel the wind resistance, you might be prone to steer very hard, which will lead to a very quick movement of the plane and maybe even your death. So what you need is some sort of haptic feedback that you know how far can I go, how much can I push. So the concept that really emerged out of cybernetics was the concept of feedback loops. And I will not go into detail with regards to the different kinds of feedback loops there are, but the idea is that when you have a complex of different systems working together, you need feedback loops in order to see whether the regulatory action is providing with the right or is causing the right effects. And one rule there is, the more complex the system, the more rules we require in order to steer them correctly. Now, if we know that, and now think of the human as a platform of technology, we realize that we are confronted in this complexity of rules. A lot of rules, because a lot of components are being added to the human platform. So how do we deal with that? There is several ways to deal with complex rules or complex systems. Adding more rules or reducing complexity. These are the two very common practices. So imagine you have a human that is enhanced, an enhanced soldier. What options do you have? You can either reduce the enhancements, thereby having less regulations applied, or you can increase the regulations in order to capture all the enhancements of the soldier. But there is, and I would argue there is a third way. Create rules that govern the complexity of the rules that are lying underneath. So, how do we then increase control over complex systems? Either by increasing the control in the variety of operators, or decreasing the variety of the operators, or indeed introducing a next level, a meta level of order of control. And these result in different effects on the agency of the human platform. I will not go into details in that because I saw that I have 5 minutes left. But the important takeaway point, I think, is taking the human platform as an example, taking the human being as an example that is being enhanced as a soldier in warfare. We see that the governance frameworks, the legal regulations, the norms that apply to us, the codes of conduct and so forth are increasing. And the question is, and there's a question to us as a society, and a question also to the government, how are we organizing these set of rules in such a way that as human beings we still have control over this complexity of technologies and converging regulations that are coming upon us. So, conclusion, the more convergence of technologies and regulations, the more the complexity increases for decision making. Human augmentation and AI agency lead to a convergence of regulatory frameworks, ethical codes, and other regulations that are causing problems that can be in conflict with each other and might lead to different behaviors that we might have to conduct, and some of which might be contradictory. So, what are then the ways of dealing with that? Either increasing the complexity of the norms, but that has potential problems. For example, contradicting norms, do that or don't do that at the same time, or leading to or solving it by reducing complexity. There we might find problems because we might have already deployed those tools, have become dependent on those tools, such as the cell phones in the pockets. Or, last but not least, creating meta-level regulations, second-order regulations that help regulate the regulations amongst each other. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Prof. Andrej, for the presentation. And do you mind to say something? Yeah. And now, proceeding to the next agenda, we will be hearing the next presentation from Dr. Oskar Gstrein, who will be talking about European AI regulation, Brussels effect versus human dignity.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for being here today. It's a great pleasure, and especially because, as has already been mentioned, over the last 2 years, we have been working together with the Center for Digital Society on a research project that was funded by NIFIC, so the Dutch academic exchange organization. And in that project, we discussed and researched a lot of aspects of cybersecurity and digital literacy, so two of the sort of pillars where the Center for Digital Society is active. And I'm here a little bit for almost a week now, so I had a lot of opportunities to visit your wonderful city and the surrounding areas, and I'm really grateful to my hosts, and I want to mention that specifically now on stage, so thank you very much for hosting and giving me such a great time, and my colleagues. And I would also like to take this opportunity on the stage to especially thank also my colleague Amaranta, because she has managed a contribution from our side so amazingly. And of course, Andrej for supporting all of these initiatives, so thank you very much. Alright, so I'm going to tell you something about a new law, the European Union, which is currently debated. And when it comes to technology regulation, on the one hand, you know, Europe is very famous for doing technology regulation. So, for instance, can anybody put the hand up who has heard about GDPR? General Data Protection Regulation? Well, you probably hear more about it because, as I learned around 10 days ago or so, not even 2 weeks, Indonesia has now also a data privacy law, data protection law. And the Indonesian data protection law, which is a new law, is modeled after the General Data Protection Regulation. So that is also something that you see increasingly all over the world, that when it comes to these specific type of regulations, the European Union and European countries are very influential. So what makes data protection the European way is that it's principle-based, technology neutral, and there are now already 157, now probably with Indonesia, 158 countries in the world who have data protection laws. And most of these countries follow the principles that have been established in laws of the European Union, which in the case of data protection goes back to the 1970s. So the first European countries who had data protection laws started since the 1970s. And then GDPR is actually just incrementally, slowly building on these types of laws. And I'm mentioning this is also relevant for this presentation here. We're going to talk about AI regulation. But data protection law is a very good example for something which is called the Brussels effect. So the Brussels effect is this capability, and that's actually a concept I should emphasize that is coined by an American scholar. Her name is Anna Bradford, and she actually says that the European Union with these types of laws has the effect to make a global difference when it comes to regulation, because if there are a couple of factors, I won't get too technical about them, but because there is a big market and there is a legislature who is willing to do these kind of things, and because if you stick to that standard, although it's a high standard, a high requirement, that means if a globally active company or offering a service, a company, if they follow the European standard, they can be sure that even if it's a high standard, they can use the same thing, the same product, the same service all over the world and they always hit the bar. So it's like an economy of scale type of thinking. And the question now with the AI regulation is whether regulating such a new technology, such as artificial intelligence, where we just see emergingly slowly what it actually means for all of us as a society, whether a similar approach will actually be successful. So whether you always will have sort of a Brussels effect type of effect in the end. And then the title of the presentation is Brussels effect versus human dignity, by human dignity. Because in the European Union, when you're thinking about laws, the legal system is built in a way where you have to legitimize why a law is following this or that track. And these tracks are established by, first and foremost, sort of constitutional principles, and part of that is human rights. And the overarching idea of human rights is that human rights are there to protect human dignity. Right? So now the question is a little bit with this new AI regulation, with this new AI law in the European Union, is this going to be something which is very much driven by this value-based type of thinking, or are we just seeing a behavior which is about market standardization and trying to gain a global effect? That is also a bit based on a paper that I wrote together with Andrej some time ago, where we also make this distinction between governance type of approaches which are either value-based, this would be here the human dignity, or power-based, which is more like in the line of the Brussels effect. And we're questioning them critically, because that also has effects on how we engage with the rest of the world. So then the last thing that I should explain from the title is actually very closely connected to the presentation that you already saw. Artificial intelligence. So the term artificial intelligence was coined at a workshop in the Dartmouth College in the United States in 1956. And there was like a 10-week seminar with just 8 to 10 participants, not all of them always being there. And all of them became really influential in shaping what we today call artificial intelligence. So that is very important to keep in mind. But they use the term artificial intelligence being aware of cybernetics. So there was a clear sort of distinction, not to follow this sort of cybernetics route, but to have a different type of term. For us today, it doesn't make so much of a difference, because we moved on, and these terms are often being used interchangeably, and depends on which type of discipline. This is the origin, so that you once heard, maybe if you don't know it already, so artificial intelligence already comes from 1956. If you move on, I think you can move on a couple of slides. Also what I'm telling you today, you can find on my Instagram page or a paper about that. If you go further, there's also a podcast. Just to the next slide. And the next slide. So you can find this on YouTube if you're interested in that. What is also important when we are talking about the European way of addressing this AI regulation, that it is actually based on an ethical framework. So the ultimate underlying ethical question is always, what should I do? So we have on the one hand this human rights sort of value framework, but we also have like an ethical framework which is more tailored to applied ethics to artificial intelligence. And there you have a high-level expert group, so this is a multi-stakeholder group. There are some academics, some experts, but there's also industry representatives, government representatives, and so on. And they came together, and if you move on, what they made is a framework for trustworthy AI. Because the idea is we want to have a law because we want to have a trustworthy and secure AI, right? So that is the background why we want to regulate this. And we have a very long discussion about whether it's good or bad to regulate this. Because there will be some people who will say it's bad to regulate AI because it stifles innovation. You know, AI, the way that we know it now, most of the applications that we are used are based on this premise of we're using big data. So we're using a lot of data, we're training algorithms using advanced statistical models, and we actually don't know the great things that these very advanced algorithmic systems can find in the data. And the outcomes are often very desirable, right? So this is one school of thinking. Then you would end up in an area where it says, yeah, maybe it's not so good to regulate, but what the European Union tries to do and has chosen is actually going into another direction, where you're questioning yourself, so which type of AI applications are desirable for you in the first place? Are there some types of applications which you don't want to have in society? This is a very, very basic question. It's also where you stand for yourself with your values, right? It does nothing have to do with, economic gains or it's just a general value-based question where there is no right or no wrong answer. This is the direction that you have to choose based on your compass, on your societal traditions, etc. So the 4 ethical principles which are most important here are respect for human autonomy, prevention of harm, fairness, explicability, and they then get more fleshed out in this framework with the 7 key requirements that you can read here on the slide. Probably the presentation will be shared with you, otherwise I can make it available. So I will not read it out here. But the idea is that you start with the principles and then you get more and more granular when you go forward. So if you go forward to the next slide, I should also mention that this high-level ethics expert group should work on this since 2018. Also a good reminder that AI governance and AI ethics is actually right here, right now happening. It's not something that is 10, 15, 20 years away. All of the systems are around us all the time. So this is actually something which is present. And I already mentioned, so they came up with this high-level expert group came up with this assessment list. But there are also alternatives to that. So what you see, at least in my field at the moment, is there are lots of new initiatives that try to develop methodologies, so ways to find out in advance whether a particular use of AI is desirable or harmful. And what I have 2 here, so one is from a colleague of us, Roberto Zicari and his colleagues, which is called the set inspection. So the idea is that you have multi-interdisciplinary teams that really first look at the application and especially also the societal implication of the technology, right? So how does it play together with society when you embed it there? A good example would be a lot of the technology that you saw being used against COVID, right? So you had a lot of apps and digital tracing and a lot of these things. but it was very rushed and often not unclear what that meant for society when the technology was actually being used to practice. Right? So what does it mean for me? What shall I do when I get notifications that I've been in touch with someone, etc. Often you see that with AI applications as well. And the second methodology is called Beyond Data Human Rights, Ethical and Social Implications of AI. So there's a book about that, it's available in open access. It's by Alessandro Mantelero. And also here you have partly a legal regulatory approach, but you also have an approach which is going into a different type of direction. And this is also something which is very important, I think, because we see increasingly this shift away from just considering ex post, after the fact, what the rules should have been from the technology, moving more towards, even for emerging technologies such as AI, moving more towards ex ante, before the fact type of regulation, so that everybody is aware of the rules, but also having methods to think about the impact, the assessment of the effects of technology before they're widely being used in society. And if I say that like this, and if we think again about this notion of trustworthy AI, if I say that this, it's also very clear that many people in the industry have doubts about that, because there is going to be a question, which type of businesses do we want as a society? Again, you cannot say from the beginning, what is going to be more beneficial for you. That is really a matter of values and how we approach this. And that is probably the biggest, this is still like this whole AI discussion, so we have these ethical principles if you move on. So we have now new laws which are being debated. They're being debated in the European Parliament and with the member states. And probably, maybe, if everything goes very quick, politicians are very ambitious with this specific type of regulation in EU. We will have something by the end of 2023. But right now we have a discussion that is going on many layers. And what is globally important, that this discussion in Europe is going on, that when I'm talking to colleagues from Brazil and from other places, we are seeing that the fact that this draft law exists is already shaping discussions elsewhere. It does not mean that everybody will follow this specific type of approach, but we can now have a proper discussion about whether and how to have rules for AI. And that is very important. And you see also countries such as the United States, where increasingly there is draft bills, although I would not be too optimistic personally that we see very soon regulation in the United States because it's a very polarized political landscape. But even China in the private sector has regulated algorithmic recommender system, has regulated other types of uses of AI, where you see that there is a more demand of being more aware of what is going on with these types of technologies at once. And then it is the question, which type of models do you choose, which type of values do you choose, how do you bake them into sort of these methodologies for assessment, and which type of rules do you have. So I don't have a lot of time left, but if you move on to the next one, you can go further, and again, so one, I will skip this, just go further. One aspect that is really discussed at the moment, go to the next one, is really the definition of AI that should be used in the regulation. Because the draft regulation has a very broad definition of AI, which would practically cover everything that in a very broad sense you can think of AI. So when I talk a very broad sense, that includes the super intelligent thinking machines, the general artificial intelligence on the one spectrum, and on the other spectrum, the machine learning algorithms, which you have to often fight with when you log in on the internet and tell the algorithm what is a cat and what is a dog or what is a bridge, etc. Right? So that is the draft definition that is currently being discussed, also because there is some skepticism, criticism from research, that especially when it comes to general purpose artificial intelligence, there should be more freedom, especially for academics and research institutes, to sort of play more with the technology. But we will see how that pans out, right? When the key characteristics that I only can cover is, and what I will focus on for the rest of the time, is a risk-based approach. I already talked a little bit about the conformance and impact assessments. That's the technical term here for these methodologies used in advance to understand the impacts of the technology. And then there's another thing, but I will leave that out for today for the discussion. And that is the question how to enforce this. because even with the GDPR, with the General Data Protection Regulation, I told you, many countries in the world have the type of laws now, but the question is also how to enforce them, right? So you would want to have an independent oversight agency which has a lot of resources to look into these complex kind of things, but that is very difficult. And also in Europe that is very difficult. And what is another layer in Europe is that while these investigations are ongoing, how do you coordinate between member states? Because there are some member states which benefit a lot from the data-driven economy and others less. Right? And there's also always a question of how prosperous those systems are and how many resources is there generally in the public sector. But this is also a question which is still open a bit. But let's talk about the risk-based approach. Because what we have is different. So the whole idea is we have this very broad definition of AI, and I already said, general purpose AI is as important as the stupid machine learning tools. And then the idea is that to start from the bottom, there are applications where there's minimal risk, so more or less no concern. There is limited risk, and most of the discussion has actually been about the top two categories. Because currently in Europe we have this discussion about the unacceptable risk. So which type of AI applications do we say from the start that we don't want to have them at all? So where there's sort of a ban. And the most controversial case, which is currently now being discussed, is the use of facial recognition in public areas. And then there is the question, do we want to ban this completely? Or do we want to make some exceptions to, for instance, search for missing children? Or do we only want to use that live? Or do we also be able to want to use that after the fact? So there's like a really big discussion at the moment going on about this biometric identification and facial recognition. I mean, in the paper that actually criticized this unacceptable risk category because, or actually quite substantially, because it is very difficult to come to clear definitions what this means. And in Europe we have the tradition of making laws which are more like generally describing the system and how it should work, and then a judge figures how to interpret it in detail. And the type of writing that is there at the moment in the document is rather abstract, I think. But probably most interesting, if you go on, is the high-risk category. We can go on again. Because you see, even in the high-risk category, so the high-risk category is the category where you have to do a lot of testing of the systems. So you have to think about, are the data sources that we're using to test the systems, are they representative? Are they complete? Is it high-quality data that we're using to train the system? Can we audit the system? Can we explain the decisions that the system makes? All these kind of questions. And if you look actually at the, this is just the headlines. Actually, there's a lot of area, I would say, which is covered by this high-risk category. Although the European Union would say most of the AI that is covered by this act is not being regulated at all, because most of it, what is used by now, is like minimal risk or no risk, right? But you see, it's like critical infrastructure is also very relevant for universities, because I don't know, during the time of COVID there was a lot of remote testing was happening, and then some institutions there was things like proctoring software, so monitoring students during written exams. So that would also be a case. And you see the list. And if you go on to the next one, so I already mentioned that, before that, requirements for high-risk guys, again, this adequate risk assessment and mitigation systems, high quality of data sets, logging of activity, so you really need to be able to explain what's going on. Detailed documentation, providing all information necessary in the system and its purpose, clear and adequate information to the user, human oversight, and the last one is a lot of testing, robustness, security, and accuracy. But what that could potentially mean is also that if this law goes into force, and laws like this, if then there are global companies who are targeting the European market, which is attractive still, then it means that at least for these high-risk categories, they would also have to change the way they develop those systems. Because now in the community, a lot of applications are based on, let's say, property and open access side of tools. So it's often a bit of patching, right? Bringing things together and seeing what works. But with that type, what works from a 9.5 cases out of 10, 95% it works, 79% it works, 80% it works, but it's still good enough, because most of the time it works. But with that type of approach for a high-risk scenario, would not be legal anymore. So you just could not do that. And that is very important because it shows you there is a different type of approach to this type of technology. And we'll all see, whether and to which degree this is desirable or not. And I actually would like to hear from you in the discussion how you desirable find that. So I will leave it here. There's lots of things to discuss. We also have the AI liability directive. There's also like an international agreement worked on where countries like Indonesia could join to have something like a more principled agreement on this. And probably there's also an Indonesian AI strategy, and lots of countries work at this at the moment. So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Let's give our second round of applause for both speakers. As we have heard the presentation from our speakers, we're going to continue our question and answer session. So for any of you who are interested to give a question or want to respond to what has been presented by our speakers, I'm giving you the chance to speak directly. Anyone? No. Mas Ismail, yes, please. He is one of our participant of TMT. Yeah. Yes, please, Mas.
Thank you for the opportunity to attend this amazing talk. And I would like to ask a question about the AI and the data privacy in the European Union. Today, Indonesia already has the data regulation protection, and I still think that it's too mature, too infant to be implemented globally in our digital infrastructure. And I would like to ask about how the GDPR helps you to achieve the data privacy in the AI era, such as in data collection and data processing. How does the GDPR help to manage this, such kind of thing?
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. It's a very good question. We could have a separate talk about that. We will not do that. So first of all, I think two things. So the GDPR was definitely also something which was developed during a time where there was a lot of talk about profiling, advertising, Cambridge Analytica scandal. So where there was a lot of fear that these type of companies, in our case it's mostly American companies, would have so much information about society that undermines the democratic process. And a lot of the rules that you see in GDPR, they are really geared against pushing back against this particular type of behavior and changing in culture. There is some criticism sometimes that, especially for smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses, they find it hard to do that. But I think it's in a sort it's an investment in a long-term culture change, which is particularly useful if you believe that as individuals we should also have space in the future to decide again what we want to do. For instance, when I'm applying for a job, I'm not just giving the company access to my Gmail account or to my social media profile, and then they already know whether they want to have me or not, right? So I still want to have like a fair procedure where we set it and start at the time when I'm really thinking about it. And I think we really need to look at data protection in the bigger picture So it's about a level of individual autonomy, and still being able to become the person that I want to be in the future without always being reduced to my past. And that requires a lot of change, which takes time, but at the same time, I think we also see some positive effects. So you even see that the big players, they change their business models, etc. So it's really investing in this type of cultural change, and I think you always need to start somewhere.
Maybe I can add to that. The one other aspect, and Oskar has referred to it before as the process effect, is the way it means the European Union has done a global effect, also in Indonesia, for example, is by requiring any entity that engages with the European market to abide by the same rules that the European Union has set. In other words, if you are an Indonesian company, if you're an American company, or a Taiwanese company, if you want to engage with the European market, you have to apply the same rules that are applicable within the European market. In other words, the general data protection guidelines are applicable, and in the future also the AI regulation will be applicable. And that means that by doing it this way, if you want to engage with the European Union as a market for your product, you will have to set the same standards for your products as if you were located in the European Union. And that is what we refer to as the process effect. It can have the opposite effect, of course, and exclude Europe from the global players. But right now, the European Union is still a relatively interesting market, globally speaking, and thus can exert some effect.
Delightful answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ismail. Well, yeah, it's interesting because I heard that many Americans scream also about this, about the GDPR. I mean, how will the EU enforce its GDPR against entities with no physical presence in the EU? What do you think? How will the EU going to deal with that?
Yeah, with the US it's complex. So actually a process which goes on for 20 years. I'm not getting too much into the details here, but there can be, so for instance with Japan and with South Korea, the EU has now an agreement that it looks at the level of data protection in Japan and South Korea like comparable as in the European Union. If you have this type of agreement, it's more than adequacy decision, the data between the EU countries and between Japan and South Korea in that case can flow relatively easily. But that also meant that those countries revised their existing data protection laws to be more in line with GDPR. With the US, you see also a little bit of a split in Europe. So on the one hand, the court, the European Court of Justice, civil society is very much pushing the US, particularly in the intelligence case, Snowden, etc., these types of things, to have more oversight and to also have the capability for individuals who live outside the US to see whether their information has been used and to check that whether it has been misused. And the US gradually tries to adopt it, so just 3 weeks ago or so. It also depends a lot on the political leadership. So right at the moment we have a political leadership which is more like favorable towards the EU. And now it seems they're making some changes in their own system again so that this is possible, but it's like back and forth. And I think, like generally speaking, we're living in an environment where there are all these blocks. So there's China, there's the US, and there is the EU, which is mostly using regulation as a tool. And everybody just tries to push for that. And it would be very desirable that we would get to a state in politics also again where we can have more open and multilateral discussions about this. But at the moment, that is not what we're seeing, unfortunately.
Well, I'm just curious how the enforcement of authorities in reality taking place against companies, for instance, who are not having physical appearances.
Very briefly answering the question, it just makes business more expensive. Because there are ways to circumvent that, but then companies need to make specific type of agreements, and they don't like to do that, and then it makes the business. So also Facebook, all of these things, if they don't comply with it, then they get fines. That's often like hundreds of millions of billions of euros. They can change it before, but it just grinds the system down. And so it has an effect. You see it also. But of course, there is still Facebook and Google, a lot of those companies. But you see also, I think, like targeted advertising, for instance, in Europe, I think they are reaching an end to this. So they have to change their models as well.
Thank you. More questions, please? Anyone? We have prepared e-wallet, by the way. Yes, please, for the best 2 questions.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Samir from Afghanistan. I have a question. Nowadays, the globe become a global village, and the global village there is still a developing country and developed country. But in the future, the developed country will engage with the developing country. But there is no digitalization in the developing country. So how they will deal with this kind of country, and how the developing country will prepare to become to be a digital relation in the developing country. So that's my question.
Okay, thank you for the question, Professor Andrej.
So that is an excellent question, and thank you very much for your question. I would like to give you a Dutch expression, and I will follow up with a Slovenian story, and maybe that will give you a little bit of an answer. The Dutch expression is de wet van de rem en de voorsprong. Translates into the law of the brake and the advantage. And the story goes as follows. I was a student, I just finished my studies. I did an internship in Slovenia. And at that time in Austria, which is my home country, internet was of course everywhere. Every home had their LAN cables and the modems. Every school had LAN installed. You know, there was before the WLAN or Wi-Fi, the local area network. You had to plug in a cable into the wall socket. And so I came to Slovenia. Everywhere, the whole country had Wi-Fi. And I was impressed. But I noticed nobody had wall plugs. And the reason was they jumped on the internet train later than the Austrians. With other words, they did not use first generation, but second generation technology. And that is an advantage that late adopter countries have. For example, when you think of current developments with generative artificial intelligence, maybe you have heard of DALI 2, the picture generating software. There have been different companies now producing this AI that you can use for free, and that allows you to generate pictures by AI through typing in some text. So these technologies are becoming free to use, and they're being increasingly adopted also in less developed countries. So they are actually adopting immediate technologies that other countries didn't have access to, but already had regulations for. With other words, how will such an interaction then look between those countries? Well, countries that come into the game later might have a later adoption advantage, because they can tailor-make both the laws but also the technology to the latest state of technology, rather than adopting very early and then being stuck with older generation technology and older generation regulations. That would be one answer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have more questions? You may? No? That's okay? Okay. We have one more? Yeah, please.
Oke, terima kasih. Selamat siang. Ini sebenarnya kasusnya kepada teman saya. Teman saya kan seorang ojek. Dia pernah di internet seorang pengemudi membuat hoax, ya maksudnya dia telah di pengemudinya ngomong ke Facebook itu kalau dia diraba-raba sama pengemudi teman saya itu, terus dia lapor ke polisi, terus difitnah, pokoknya ya, pengemudi teman saya itu difitnah sama penumpangnya sampai ke Polres itu, terus akhirnya si penumpang saya itu, pengemudi saya, teman saya itu laporan ke ITE di Polda, tapi karena penumpangnya merasa takut, akhirnya dia mencabut laporannya di Polres. Setelah itu sama kepolisian di Polda juga tidak ada terusnya, karena padahal dia udah malu gitu. Terus apa langkahnya pengemudi teman saya itu yang kayak laporannya di Polda seperti membeku gitu, diem aja gitu, padahal di Polres sudah dicabut sama penumpangnya. Terus bagaimana langkah pengemudi teman saya itu? Terima kasih.
Okay, it's a bit challenging for me to translate it. So it's about I'm not sure if I have to mention the brand, one of the ride-sharing company. The rider has a problem with a customer, and then
dilecehkan, tapi itu kan cuma fitnah.
Okay, it's like
sebenarnya nggak kayak gitu. Jadi karena penumpangnya itu ternyata takut sama ITE, karena sama pengemudinya dilakukan di ITE, terus akhirnya sama laporan di Polres dicabut gitu. Jadi apa selanjutnya? Apakah polisi di Polda itu tahu tentang apa ya, kesalahan dan sama pencemaran nama baiknya di ITE gitu?
and she was sexually harassed by the rider, but then she was trying to fill in the report at the police, but then because she's afraid that she will get the sanction from our IT rules regulation, and then she just cancel her report to the police, and then pertanyaannya?
Ya, terus langkahnya pengemudi itu gimana? Apakah kok cuma diem aja, polisinya sama polisian di Polda itu kayak membeku gitu, kayak nggak ada kelanjutnya, kayak nggak gimana, penumpangnya nggak dipanggil atau gimana gitu? Polda yang ITE.
So he's questioning why the police do nothing instead helping the customer, something like that, or because he's afraid of the law also, or.
No, but I think that the direction that we're heading in is that there is a platform in between, and the normal institutions are not working the way that they're supposed to work because there is a platform. Which this is also something, when we are having this discussion about what does it mean to have digitized, or like in science you hear it now. I prefer actually also personally the term datafied society. Right? So as we're moving into that type of direction, why do these institutions not work? And then it's very easy to say, and we have to be careful. I think really careful in taking up these narratives from big companies who you can easily join, or you can always aspire to join their side, and then want to become prosperous and buy all of these promises, etc. And the future is going to be bright, etc. We have to be much more careful in looking into how does technology interact with society, and for whom is it beneficial? So who really profits from that and how? And I think the last 15 years we had a bit of a tendency to be too giving too much leeway to the big corporations, to the big money especially, who do not understand how our societies work. And at the same time, of course, we have to also work in a direction where we keep our societies open, right? But right now, it's like also what we discussed before, we see that everybody tries to, maybe also because of the pandemic, tries to move back, tries to build their safe bubbles. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think we really should be moving more into a direction where we critically engage with how does technology affect which parts of society, and remain an open mindset, so how could we make it better together. And I think, at least that is a European answer, I think regulation helps there. It's just, we need to take all of the interests on board to make a good regulation.
Okay, terima kasih Mas. That would be our last question for today. You want to add more, Prof? Okay, yeah, that's a lot. Actually, I have more questions, but like Dr. Oskar mentioned about technology and us, and also the cybernetics. At first, I was thinking that what human and technology should be segregated, but people are already using that, like retinal implants or cochlear in ears. Are there? Deaf people or blind people means subhuman or something like that, because then they need to be elevated in the base of specification, or are we all in need of enhancement? But then, much more than just the science. It has also deep philosophical insights and convergent ideas from multiple areas of science. And the right to privacy is a fundamental right in Europe, also in here. And laws need to be updated to deal with the current technological challenges. So thank you very much for our both speakers today. Give the floor back to our
our honorable speakers, Professor Andrej and also Dr. Oskar, and also thank you to Ms. Anissa Pramita Wiharani for the moderation. And we need you to remain on the stage, because after this we are about to proceed to the next agenda, which is the giving or the transfer of a token of appreciation, a small gift from Center for Digital Society. We are inviting Ms. Anissa Pratita Mantovani as the Executive Secretary of Research and Partnership, who will be giving the token of appreciations to our honorable speakers. And we are also inviting Ms. Amaranta Luna as the representative of University of Groningen to come with us together, join with us on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed, we have learned together how the AI technology have been developed, and it's been a very interesting experience that we need to please, Ms. Anissa Pratita, give Professor Andrej for the first speaker. One of our speakers has already taught us about how the regulations should be implemented together with the development of technology. Please take a picture first, and then let's make this remain as our memory of the collaboration between Center for Digital Society and the University of Groningen. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a sign of collaboration within our institution, who are focusing on the related issues of digital society and also digital development. Once again, please give a round of applause for both of our speakers. And we hope that you receive our gifts, our small gifts, happily, because this is the least that we can give to you, and we are looking forward for our next collaborations, and maybe for the next agenda or the next events, we can invite all the smart people who are participating today in this afternoon with us on Visible Convention Hall. And now we're giving the token of appreciation for Ms. Amaranta Luna as representative of University of Groningen. Yeah, maybe we can take a picture again together. Maybe we can wait for. Oh, okay, so.
We also brought something.
Okay. So this is an exchange, not only a transfer of token of appreciation. Please, our photographer, to take the documentation of this exchange of token of appreciation. Thank you so much once again to our colleagues from University of Groningen, Professor Andrej, Dr. Oskar, Ms. Amaranta Luna. And now, with that being done, unfortunately, Digitalk 53 has arrived to the end of the event. And once again, I would like to show our gratitude to our honorable speakers and moderator, Professor Andrej, Dr. Oskar, and Ms. Anissa, for the fruitful discussion that we had today. And also thank you to smart people who have been actively participating in this event. I hope that in the future, there will be an improvement in the matter of cybersecurity and the risk management that we can overcome together. And of course, there will be collaboration for our future between both countries, not only in the institutional field. Smart people, before we end the event, there are some information I would like to share. There will be e-certificate for the attendees, and so don't forget to fill the attendance form that you can scan the QR code on the registration table. And our team has already selected two best inquiries who have asked the questions, so please approach our team for the e-wallet that we have provided for you. And last but not least, don't forget to exchange your lunch ticket, lunch voucher that you have already got when you registered in front to get the lunch table, while also scan for the QR code for the certificates outside. And don't forget to keep updated by following our social media on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok on @cfds_ugm and our website cfds.principal.ugm.ac.id. Now, smart people, let's take a picture together with the speakers to keep today's Digitalk 53 memories even more longer and immortal, so that we can memorize this event. Please, to our speakers and also our colleagues, to come down, that we can take a picture together by facing this side of the stage. Yeah, we can face this stage. Please, to our smart people, to stand up, then we will take a picture together. It's a very interesting experience that we have for today. I will give you a sign, a cue. Maybe I will count, Mr. Panani, I will count from 1 until 3 for the pictures. Okay, let's give our biggest smile. 1, 2, 3. Maybe once more with a more cheerful, maybe a freestyle with peace sign. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much for everyone who has been participating in this event. We would like to express our gratitude, and smart people, that's all from us. I hope you all have a great experience from this event, and thank you so much for coming and attending.